Nia was the kind of girl who seemed to carry sunlight in her smile and warmth in her voice. From the moment she woke each morning, she moved with a gentle grace, tending to the small garden behind her modest home, greeting the village children with soft laughter, and helping her father with chores both in the fields and around the house. Her father, Omar, was a good man, patient and hard-working, yet kind-hearted to a fault. He loved Nia dearly, but his attention was often consumed by the demands of running their household and caring for the small flock of goats they kept for milk and trade. This left Nia vulnerable to the gaze of her stepmother, Mara, whose heart had hardened with envy from the day Nia's mother had passed. Mara was a woman whose beauty had once been admired, but the years had dimmed it, and where charm had once been, bitterness now resided. She watched Nia with eyes that flickered between admiration and malice, seeing in the girl a reflection of the life she herself had never fully embraced. Every compliment Nia received from the villagers, every gentle touch of affection from her father, and every word of praise spoken for her intelligence gnawed at Mara's pride. Mara's envy was quiet at first, manifesting in subtle barbs, in whispered comparisons to Nia's late mother, and in dismissive comments meant to belittle her accomplishments. She would remark on the way Nia tended the garden or sewed her clothes, claiming that her work would never measure up to that of a true lady of the house. And yet, no matter how venomous her words, Nia responded with kindness, a quiet strength that only seemed to fuel Mara's growing resentment. The household, though modest, bore the weight of Mara's tension. The wooden beams of the ceiling seemed to groan under her gaze, the simple hearth flickered uneasily when she entered a room, and even the goats in the pen outside seemed to sense the unease. Omar, though good-natured, often turned a blind eye to the subtle cruelty his wife inflicted, believing that time and patience might soften her heart. He never realized the depth of Mara's envy, the way it had grown from mere irritation into a consuming obsession, until it began to manifest in small but deliberate acts aimed at undermining Nia. It began with chores. Tasks that once took Nia a few hours now seemed endless, with Mara constantly rearranging the duties, making her work twice as hard while simultaneously praising herself for teaching her proper discipline. Meals became a battleground of suspicion. Mara would slip strange herbs or untested ingredients into Nia's food, ostensibly to strengthen her health, but with the covert hope that the girl would stumble or fall ill. Nia, ever perceptive and cautious, ate only what she felt safe consuming and always kept a water jar nearby, testing flavors and scents before swallowing. She noticed the careful glances Mara cast in her direction, the smirk that would curl at the corners of her lips, and the way her stepmother's eyes would linger on her with a mixture of longing and scorn. Even in moments of rest, Mara's shadow loomed. When Nia attempted to read or write in the quiet of the afternoon, Mara would swoop in under the guise of supervision, checking her work, questioning her progress and offering corrections that seemed helpful on the surface but were meant to erode confidence. Nia felt the weight of her stepmother's eyes as she wrote, felt the silent judgment pressing down like a thick cloth. And yet, despite the oppression, Nia did not falter. Her mind remained sharp, her heart compassionate, and her spirit resilient. She learned to move quietly through the house, to anticipate Mara's moods and adjust her actions accordingly, always maintaining her gentle demeanor while navigating the treacherous currents of envy that Mara stirred. Outside the home, the village remained Nia's sanctuary. The neighbors adored her, drawn to her warmth and her wisdom despite her young age. Children would gather around her, listening intently as she told stories of faraway lands or taught them how to tend their own small gardens. Adults sought her advice, knowing her mind was keen and her judgment fair. Even the elderly who once whispered about her strange gift of understanding the world, came to respect her insight and kindness. And all the while Mara's envy deepened, gnawing at her insides like a fire that could not be extinguished. She despised the love and admiration Nia received, hating the way the villagers' eyes would light up at the sight of her stepdaughter, how her father's gaze softened when he looked upon Nia, and how the children's laughter seemed to follow the girl wherever she went. Mara's cruelty was never explosive. It was the quiet, insidious type that wore at Nia's edges, like water slowly carving a stone. She would misplace Nia's belongings, subtly shame her in front of the servants, or claim that Nia had overstepped her duties when she had done nothing wrong. She planted seeds of doubt in Omar's mind, suggesting that perhaps Nia's achievements were less impressive than they seemed, or that her popularity among the villagers was somehow a threat to the household. But Nia, with her unwavering kindness and innate understanding, navigated every trap Mara set, never retaliating, always observing, always patient, always growing stronger in ways Mara could not comprehend. Yet the tension in the household continued to mount, reaching a point where even the walls seemed to whisper of the storm that brewed. Mara's envy had evolved into a dangerous obsession, a need to control and diminish Nia entirely. The girl, for all her grace and intelligence, knew that her stepmother's hatred would not be sated by words or patience alone. She felt the currents of malice that Mara stirred, and though she remained outwardly calm, her mind worked ceaselessly, planning, observing, and waiting for the moment when survival would demand more than quiet resilience. In those moments, Nia often retreated to the small attic window that overlooked the forest beyond the village. She would watch the sun cast long shadows across the trees, listening to the wind rustle through the leaves, finding comfort in the larger world beyond Mara's grasp. The forest seemed alive to her, a companion in her solitude, a place where her spirit could breathe freely even when trapped within the confines of the home. The birds, the trees, and the distant howl of wolves became her confidants, whispering strength and courage into her heart. It was in these quiet, stolen moments that Nia's resolve solidified, preparing her for the trials Mara would inevitably unleash and forging the inner power that would one day allow her to rise above the cruelty and claim her destiny. Nia's life, though shadowed by Mara's envy and cunning, was also illuminated by her resilience, her kindness, and the subtle, enduring strength that radiated from within. Every act of patience, every smile offered despite scorn, every quiet victory over Mara's schemes, nurtured a spirit that no envy, no cruelty could extinguish. And in the silent spaces of the house, in the fleeting moments before dawn, the seeds of a power connected not to force but to heart, courage, and understanding were quietly taking root, waiting for the night when the moon would rise, the forest would stir, and Nia would no longer be the hunted, but the one who leads. Mara's envy had grown from quiet discontent into something sharper, like a blade honed in darkness. Each day she watched Nia move through the village with a grace that seemed effortless, with a smile that could melt even the hardest hearts, and with a mind that drew admiration from young and old alike. Mara could no longer tolerate the light her stepdaughter carried, nor the way villagers spoke of her as if she were a treasure beyond measure. The envy that had simmered in silence now began to whisper like poison, urging Mara to act, to reclaim the attention and influence she felt slipping away with every kind word Nia received. It began subtly. Mara would make offhand comments to the neighbors, small jabs veiled as concern. "I fear the girl works too hard," she would say, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Perhaps the village praises her, but what of the effort it takes to keep up appearances?" Some villagers, uncertain and respectful of her status, would nod politely, a seed of doubt planted in their minds. Mara would smile, pretending to stroke her chin as if pondering their welfare, while her eyes burned with the desire to isolate Nia completely. The whispers grew bolder over time, spreading from the marketplace to the quiet paths where children played, painting Nia as arrogant, strange, or even dangerous, a girl who basked too readily in the admiration of others. Nia, for all her awareness, felt the change around her. Friends who once ran to her for advice now hesitated, unsure how to navigate the tension Mara stirred. Children avoided her shadow, whispering secrets to each other instead of approaching the girl they loved. Even elders who had once sought her counsel seemed distracted, their eyes flicking toward Mara with a mix of fear and uncertainty. Yet despite sensing the rising malice, Nia did not respond with anger or complaint. She remained gentle, cautious in her interactions, and careful not to provoke the wrath she knew lurked in her stepmother's heart. Her movements were measured, her words chosen for kindness, for clarity, and for the quiet truth she held inside herself. Mara's schemes were not limited to words. She would rearrange chores, claiming that Nia was careless or lazy, ensuring the girl was constantly exhausted and distracted. Meals would be prepared with deliberate mistakes, subtly forcing Nia to labor longer in the kitchen, while Mara would cast quick, judging glances as if testing her endurance. At times, Mara would instruct servants to deliver misleading messages, ensuring that Nia's friends in the village received confusing or false information, discouraging them from visiting or offering aid. Nia, perceptive and resilient, began to notice these manipulations. She learned to move quietly, to anticipate Mara's moods, and to seek refuge in hidden corners of the home or the small garden where she could breathe freely. Even as isolation threatened to dim her world, Nia found comfort in the small constants around her: the rustle of leaves in the trees, the chatter of birds, the distant howl of wolves echoing from the forest. These natural companions seemed to recognize her heart, providing a quiet reassurance that Mara's malice could not touch. She whispered to the wind, to the trees, and to the animals, and though her friends in the village might have faltered, the world itself seemed to respond to her gentle presence. The forest, the birds, and even the light of the moon felt like allies, reminding her that even in isolation she was not truly alone. Mara's malice continued to grow, but Nia's spirit remained steadfast. Each act of cruelty, each whisper spread to undermine her, was met with a calm resilience that Mara could neither understand nor anticipate. Nia's heart stayed open, her kindness intact, and her cautious optimism allowed her to survive in a home poisoned by envy. The girl moved through each day with awareness, her eyes quietly observing, her mind noting every scheme, every whisper, every shadow Mara cast, preparing for the night when the balance would shift and the strength she nurtured in silence would rise to meet the darkness. The night was thick with shadows, the forest a living maze of twisting trees and rustling undergrowth. Mara's voice had been sweet, coaxing, as she led Nia along the familiar path that diverged from the village and wound deeper into the dark heart of the forest. "There is work to be done," Mara said, her tone concealing venom beneath false concern. "Take these herbs to the edge of the woods. The village depends on your care." Nia, trusting yet cautious, accepted the basket of roots and dried flowers, her hand steady despite the subtle unease in her chest. The moon hung low, its silver light barely filtering through the thick canopy, and Nia's footsteps fell softly against the leaf-strewn earth, each step carrying her closer to the fate Mara had plotted. As the forest grew denser, the sounds of nocturnal life intensified. Crickets sang in unison, owls hooted from high branches, and somewhere in the distance, the low growl of a predator vibrated through the trees. Nia paused, a shiver tracing her spine, sensing the tension in the air. She called out softly, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Her voice carried courage even as her pulse quickened, a delicate mixture of hope and fear. No answer came, only the whisper of leaves and the distant howl of wind through the branches. Unseen eyes seemed to watch her, shadows shifting in ways that made the hairs on her arms rise. Then Mara's words rang again, deceptively kind, "This is the place. Wait here while I return to fetch another basket." Nia turned to see Mara retreating along the path, her figure swallowed by darkness. The girl's heart tightened as realization dawned, the subtle betrayal of her stepmother crystallizing into fear. She was alone, deep in the forest, and the scent of damp earth and pine was suddenly punctuated by a metallic tang, sharp and foreign, hinting at danger. Nia's instincts told her she was being watched, that the forest itself seemed alive with anticipation. A sudden rustle snapped her attention to a nearby clearing, where the ground dipped into a shallow hollow. There, with eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight, a pack of wolves emerged from the underbrush. Their fur gleamed silver, their teeth glinting as they circled with measured caution, sniffing the air and growling low in unison. Nia froze, the basket of herbs dangling from her trembling hands. Her body quivered, yet she did not fall to despair. She remembered the stories her mother had told her, of courage faced in moments when the heart quakes and yet refuses to yield. She drew in a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the forest around her, the whisper of wind through the trees as if urging her to remain calm. The wolves advanced, their snarls resonating like drums of warning, and Nia's mind raced. Fear clawed at her, yet she recognized something extraordinary in the creature's eyes, not mere aggression but intelligence, a reflection of the forest's own judgment. She dropped the basket, stepping carefully, holding her hands open and steady, and whispered, "I mean no harm. I wish only to live." Her voice, quivering yet unwavering, seemed to mingle with the rhythm of the night. For long minutes, the pack regarded her, nostrils flaring, ears twitching, the tension tangible in the cold air. Then slowly one of the wolves, a massive creature with a scar along its shoulder, stepped forward. Its posture softened, the growl fading into a low hum of recognition. The other wolves followed, circling and sniffing, but they made no move to strike. Nia realized, with a mixture of awe and relief, that the forest had not abandoned her. The wolves, guardians of their realm, had accepted her presence, sensing the courage that glowed within her despite the mortal peril she faced. As the wind whispered through the trees, the pack settled around her, forming a living barrier between her and Mara's treachery. Nia's fear began to ebb, replaced by a profound understanding that her spirit was intertwined with the forest, that her courage had awakened a protection greater than any mortal threat. She knelt on the mossy ground, her heart still pounding, and murmured gratitude to the moon above, which cast a silver path across the clearing. The night, once full of danger, had shifted, the balance restored by the strength she refused to surrender, and Nia felt a quiet promise stir within her. One day this night's terror would transform into power, and the wolves would answer her call. The night sky stretched endlessly above the forest, a deep indigo canvas sprinkled with stars that shimmered like scattered jewels. Slowly the full moon began its ascent, lifting from the horizon with an otherworldly grace. Its pale silver light spilled across the trees, casting long, dancing shadows and illuminating the forest floor in soft brilliance. Nia lifted her face toward the glow, feeling its warmth wash over her, unlike anything she had ever known. The shadows that had seemed so menacing moments before now softened into gentle forms, and the moonlight seemed to hum a quiet, welcoming melody just for her. The wolves, once a formidable threat, now shifted their attention from the surrounding darkness to Nia herself. Their glowing eyes reflected the moon's brilliance, and their fur seemed to ripple like liquid silver under its light. Instead of snarling or circling in aggression, they began to gather closer, forming a protective ring around her. Nia felt the pulse of their collective breath, the rhythm of their hearts syncing with the beat of the forest, and she realized that fear was no longer her companion, courage was. The pack, sensing the purity and bravery that radiated from her spirit, had accepted her not as prey, but as one of their own, a sister of the wild. As she knelt on the moss-covered ground, Nia extended her hands slowly toward the wolves, her fingers brushing the tips of the nearest one's ears. The largest wolf leaned into her touch, nuzzling gently, and a shiver of awe ran through her. In that moment she understood that the moon had not merely illuminated the forest, it had awakened something ancient within her, a connection that bridged the human heart and the spirit of the wilderness. Every leaf, every rustle, every whisper of wind seemed to answer her presence, acknowledging that she belonged to this night and its creatures, bound not by fear but by respect and understanding. The moonlight poured down in silvery streams, highlighting the delicate features of Nia's face, the sheen of her hair, and the subtle trembling of relief in her hands. She could sense a shift in the forest itself. The air grew thick with quiet energy, and the trees seemed to bend slightly toward her, their leaves quivering as if applauding her bravery. Even the distant hoots of owls and the soft murmur of night insects harmonized into a symphony that felt orchestrated just for her. The wolves, attuned to this resonance, became more animated, their eyes reflecting understanding and curiosity rather than hunger. Nia spoke softly to the moon, her voice almost a whisper, yet carried with conviction. I mean no harm. I seek only to survive, to honor the forest and all its life. Her words, simple yet sincere, seemed to weave into the moonlight itself. Tiny motes of silver dust drifted from the beams, curling around her, mingling with the mist rising from the forest floor. The wolves pressed closer, their warm bodies forming a living circle of protection, and Nia felt a sense of empowerment ripple through her very being. For hours, the moon traced its path across the sky, casting its protective glow over Nia and her newfound guardians. She began to sense the unspoken language of the pack, a rhythm of mutual respect, trust, and understanding. Every flick of a tail, every cautious step, every soft nuzzle communicated acceptance and unity. The fear that had gripped her in Mara's cruel trap dissolved completely, replaced by an awareness of the strength that flowed through her veins and the ancient wisdom that now seemed to whisper through the trees. As the first light of dawn teased the horizon, Nia looked upon the wolves with gratitude, understanding that this night had changed her forever. She had faced the brink of death and emerged not broken, but bonded with the wild, guided by courage and illuminated by the gentle, eternal rise of the moon. She rose to her feet, shoulders squared, eyes alight with determination, knowing that when the world above returned, she would carry this night within her, and when the time came, the wolves would follow her back to the palace, answering the call of a girl whose heart had earned their loyalty. Nia spent her nights under the full moon, the silver light washing over the forest and casting long, ghostly shadows among the trees. At first she had feared the wolves, imagining their snarls and sharp teeth would end her life. But now she felt something entirely different, a pulse, a rhythm in their movements that mirrored the moon's quiet, steady glow. It became clear to her that these wolves were guided by more than instinct. They moved with purpose, attuned to the energies of the night and the subtle commands of the world around them. As she observed them, she noticed patterns. The way a wolf's ears twitched toward a sound, how their tails swished when they acknowledged each other, the low murmurs they exchanged in soft growls and yips. Slowly she began to understand that this was a language, silent but precise, flowing through gestures, sounds, and a shared instinct. A tilt of a head, a careful step forward, a pause before moving, each conveyed warning, reassurance, or direction. The pack was communicating, and with patience, Nia found herself responding in kind. Tentatively at first, she mimicked their gestures. A hand held out like a lowered snout, a nod to signal attention, soft whispers that matched the rhythm of their growls. To her amazement, they responded. Wolves that had once circled her warily now approached, brushing against her, brushing her sleeve with wet noses as if acknowledging a newfound bond. When she raised her hand gently, they stopped, waited, and watched. When she moved with calm intent, they mirrored her motions, a silent dance of trust and recognition. She realized the wolves were more than just animals, they were creatures of the moon, their spirits intertwined with the lunar light that guided them. At night, when the moon reached its highest point, the forest seemed to hum with energy. Nia could feel it coursing through her veins, the connection between her heart and the pack's collective pulse. It was as though the moon itself whispered instructions, shaping the movements of the wolves and guiding her own instincts. The more she interacted with them, the deeper her understanding grew. She discovered that each wolf had a role. The leaders moved with measured authority, the sentinels watched the edges of the clearing, the youngest followed her gestures closely, eager to learn. She began to assign them tasks, not orders but gentle suggestions, a nod toward the clearing, a soft hum in the night. And they obeyed, not out of fear, but out of recognition of her calm authority, her courage, and her protective spirit. In return, the wolves protected her. They guided her through dark thickets, warned her of hidden dangers, and provided warmth when the cold of the forest crept into her bones. Even more astonishing, they seemed to anticipate her needs. A wolf would circle back with water from a nearby stream, another nudged her forward along a safer path when she hesitated. With each passing night, Nia felt a bond deepen, not just of loyalty but of shared purpose. By the time the first light of dawn brushed the horizon, Nia understood her place within the pack. She was not merely a human among wolves, she had become their leader and protector, the bridge between their instinct and her gentle guidance. The forest, the moon, and the pack recognized her as one of their own, and in that understanding, Nia discovered a power she had never known, the quiet strength of trust, connection, and harmony with nature itself. The wolves, once her threat, had become her guardians, her companions, and her family in the silver light of the moon. Tarek was a seasoned traveler and hunter, known throughout the neighboring villages for his keen senses and quiet wisdom. When he first heard the rumors of Nia's disappearance, whispered around fires and at market stalls, his curiosity was piqued. Stories spoke of a girl who had vanished into the forest, a girl whose stepmother's cruelty had driven her to the wilderness. Some said she had perished, others whispered of strange sightings under the full moon. Tarek, a man who trusted his instincts more than gossip, decided he would investigate. He followed the faint trail leading into the dense forest, the earth still holding impressions of hurried feet and soft paws. The air carried a subtle tension, a mixture of fear and anticipation, as though the forest itself were holding its breath. Tarek noticed peculiar patterns in the tracks, human steps that merged seamlessly with those of a large pack, wolf prints that circled and paused as if acknowledging someone's presence. It was unlike anything he had ever encountered. Setting down his pack, Tarek crouched and observed quietly. He saw glimpses of movement, shadows darting between the trees, the glint of silver under the moonlight. There was a rhythm to the forest, a pulse he could feel in his chest. It was the wolves, he realized, moving with purpose, their bodies coordinated with unseen precision. And at the center of it all, a soft figure moving with them, guiding and being guided in perfect harmony. The hunter's heart quickened. This was no ordinary girl and these were no ordinary wolves. Over the following nights, Tarek returned quietly, careful not to disturb the delicate balance. He left small offerings along the trails, herbs to heal, scraps of food, even water in carved wooden bowls. Each time he watched from a distance as Nia and the pack discovered them. The wolves approached cautiously at first, sniffing and circling the gifts, but Nia stepped forward with calm authority, acknowledging both Tarek's presence and his intent. She accepted his offerings not as a command, but as a gesture of trust and mutual respect. Tarek marveled at their bond. The girl seemed to understand the wolves in a way that defied explanation, and the wolves responded with unwavering loyalty. Even from afar, he could sense her bravery and kindness, the quiet power that had earned their devotion. He realized that Nia's survival was not mere chance. It was her courage, her empathy, and her connection to the natural world that kept her alive. Though he never approached too closely, Tarek began to leave more than food. He brought small tools, pencils for sketching, and even simple charms, tokens meant to aid her, to honor the unusual magic he sensed in her presence. Each night, as he disappeared into the shadows, he carried a sense of awe and humility, knowing he was witnessing something extraordinary. By the time the moon reached its peak each night, Tarek had come to understand that the forest, the wolves, and the girl were united in a sacred balance. Nia was no longer just a lost child. She had become a leader, a protector, and a symbol of courage in the wilderness. And the hunter, once merely an observer, became a quiet ally, ensuring that the girl who had survived Mara's cruelty would thrive until the time came for her to return. Mara sat in her chamber, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across the walls. For nights she had slept uneasily, haunted by dreams of the girl she had once tried to destroy. At first she told herself it was mere imagination, that Nia had perished as planned. Yet now, the whispers that drifted through the village like smoke could no longer be ignored. People spoke in hushed tones of strange sights in the forest, of a pack of wolves moving with uncanny precision, and of a girl who walked among them with calm authority. Each story was a thorn in Mara's mind, each rumor a hammer pounding on the walls of her composure. She paced her chambers, hands trembling slightly as she tried to convince herself it was impossible. The villagers, once fearful of her temper and cunning, were now beginning to murmur about something stronger, something beyond human control. Mara's envy, which had fueled every cruel act, began to twist into a deeper fear, a fear not just of Nia's survival, but of the power the girl had gained in the wilderness. Mara could feel it in the way the wind seemed to carry whispers of Nia's courage, in the way the nights seemed charged with something wild and untamed. Her mind replayed the events that had led to Nia's supposed demise. Each malicious plan, the isolating whispers, the cruel traps, the night in the forest, suddenly felt fragile and inadequate. If Nia had survived, what then? Mara's imagination conjured visions of the girl returning, not weak or frightened, but radiant and commanding. The thought made her stomach churn. Her authority, her influence, even her control over the villagers, might crumble in the presence of someone so brave and so untouchable. The queen called her handmaidens, her advisors, anyone who might offer counsel or comfort, yet even their presence did little to calm her. They whispered reassurances, but Mara could hear doubt threading through their words, the subtle hesitation that revealed they too sensed something extraordinary. Her panic grew with each uncertain glance, each unspoken fear in the courtier's eyes. She realized that the forest had given Nia something no one could easily defeat, a bond with creatures and forces beyond human reach, a courage that could not be broken by cruelty alone. Mara's nights became restless. She would startle at every distant howl, every rustle in the trees, imagining the girl moving among the wolves, training, growing stronger, returning with the power to defy her. Even the smallest sound, the flap of a bird's wings, the snap of a twig, made her heart race with dread. She feared the village would soon recognize what she had tried to erase, that Nia was not just alive but thriving, and that her survival carried a weight of authority and respect that Mara could not challenge. By the time the sun rose each morning, Mara's fear had already rooted itself deep within her. Every day felt like a countdown, a tightening noose around her imagination and ambition. The queen's envy, once sharpened with cruelty, had now evolved into pure terror. She knew that the girl she had sought to eliminate would not remain hidden forever, and the thought of Nia's inevitable return, commanding the wilderness and the pack that now followed her, filled Mara with a fear that no scheme, no deception could fully erase. Mara, fueled by fear and desperation, could no longer remain idle. Rumors of Nia's survival had spread like wildfire, and each tale she heard chipped away at her authority. Determined to reclaim control and eliminate the threat once and for all, Mara gathered a small hunting party under the cover of night, carrying torches, nets and weapons meant to corner the girl and the wolves that had become her guardians. The queen's heart raced with anticipation. She imagined triumph, the collapse of Nia's growing legend, and the restoration of her absolute power over the village. But as they entered the forest, a chill ran through the group. The trees whispered in the wind, and shadows seemed to shift unnaturally, forming shapes that were both familiar and impossible. Mara's confidence wavered, but she pressed forward, convinced that the girl could not possibly anticipate their movements. Yet deep inside, an unease gnawed at her, a quiet, persistent warning that she had underestimated the wilderness she sought to command. When they finally spotted Nia near a clearing, bathed in silver moonlight, the scene was not as Mara had expected. Nia stood calmly, her posture serene, her gaze unwavering. Around her, the wolves had gathered, forming a perfect circle that seemed to pulse with life and energy. Their eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, reflecting the intelligence and loyalty that Mara had never imagined a wild animal could possess. A low, resonant growl rolled from the pack, vibrating through the forest floor, sending shivers into the spines of the hunters. Mara raised her hand, signaling the attack, but the wolves were ready. With a synchronized movement, they created a living barrier, circling Nia and shifting with such speed and precision that every attempt to advance was blocked. The wolves' howls echoed through the trees, a chorus of warning that made the very air tremble. Mara felt an unfamiliar weight of dread settle upon her chest as she realized that each step she took was anticipated, every plan countered before it could take shape. Nia, untouched and calm, extended her hand, and the wolves shifted slightly, acknowledging her command. The bond between girl and pack was undeniable, an unspoken understanding that radiated through the clearing. Mara's anger surged, but each act of cruelty she attempted seemed to rebound, leaving her party flustered and disoriented. Nets tangled in roots, torches extinguished by sudden gusts of wind, and the wolves' movements became a living labyrinth, guiding Mara's hunters into confusion. In that moment, Mara understood that her power over fear and intimidation held no sway here. Nia's courage, combined with the strength and instinct of the pack, had created a fortress that could not be breached by conventional means. Every attempt to capture or harm the girl only strengthened her legend, and the forest itself seemed to bend in support of the one who had proven herself worthy of its guardianship. As the night wore on, Mara and her hunters retreated, defeated not by violence, but by the unity of loyalty, courage and trust that Nia had forged with the wolves. The queen's face was pale with panic and humiliation. She realized that her cruelty had empowered the very force she sought to destroy. Nia, meanwhile, stood among her guardians, her calm presence radiating confidence and compassion. The pack pressed close, not in aggression but in reverent support, demonstrating that the girl they protected was more than a mere human. She was a leader, a protector, and a symbol of harmony between courage and the wild. By the time dawn began to streak the horizon with silver and gold, Mara had learned an undeniable truth. No act of malice could overcome the strength of loyalty, the bond of trust, and the courage that radiated from a heart both kind and brave. Nia's father, Idris, had spent countless nights in worry and sorrow, believing his daughter lost to the forest and the cruelty of her stepmother. Each day he noticed the emptiness in the home, the absence of Nia's laughter, the quiet corners where she used to read or weave her stories. Though Mara maintained a mask of composure, the unease in Idris's heart refused to dissipate. He began to sense that something was amiss, that the disappearance of his daughter was not the accident he had been led to believe. One evening as he wandered the outskirts of the forest, Idris noticed a strange sight, a series of tracks leading deeper into the trees, but unlike any normal animal trails. They were larger, more deliberate, and appeared as though they were guided by a mind rather than mere instinct. At first, he hesitated, unsure whether to follow, fearing what he might discover. Yet the quiet voice of paternal concern pushed him forward, urging him to seek the truth. Deeper into the forest, Idris heard a low, harmonious chorus, wolves communicating through subtle growls, whines, and the rhythmic pounding of paws against the soft earth. At the center of this remarkable scene stood Nia, calm and poised, her hand resting lightly on the head of the largest wolf. The animals moved with purpose around her, protective yet deferential, clearly acknowledging her authority. Nia's eyes met Idris's, and in that instant the father saw something extraordinary, not fear or desperation but courage, wisdom, and an undeniable bond with the wild that he had never imagined. Idris's heart swelled with relief and astonishment. The girl he had thought lost had survived, not just surviving, but thriving with the aid of creatures that many feared and misunderstood. He listened as Nia spoke softly, not in human words alone, but in gestures and tones that communicated seamlessly with the wolves. Each movement radiated harmony and understanding, and Idris realized that this was no ordinary child. She was extraordinary, gifted in a way that transcended the ordinary laws of nature. The weight of the revelation struck him harder as he recalled Mara's cruelty and the day she had abandoned Nia to the forest. Rage and disbelief clashed with relief and wonder. Idris had been blind to Mara's envy and cruelty, accepting her words at face value, failing to recognize the malice that had endangered his daughter. Now, confronted with undeniable proof of Nia's survival and the extraordinary power she had cultivated, he vowed never again to let deception or fear cloud his judgment. With careful steps, Idris approached Nia and the pack. The wolves did not flinch or growl at his presence. Instead, they observed silently as if weighing his intentions. Nia spoke in her gentle, commanding tone, guiding the pack to part, allowing her father to see her fully. Idris reached out and took her hands, feeling the warmth and strength radiating from her. His voice trembled as he spoke, asking her to forgive him for not understanding sooner, for not seeing the truth that had been hidden beneath Mara's lies. Nia's smile was soft, patient, and forgiving, embodying the resilience she had cultivated throughout her ordeal. Idris realized that the girl before him was a living testament to courage, compassion, and the extraordinary bond between humanity and nature. Together they walked back toward the edge of the forest, Nia leading the pack with dignity and control, Idris supporting her with renewed admiration and protectiveness. That night, Idris returned home, his mind racing with the knowledge that Mara's deceit was finally revealed. He knew he must confront her and ensure that Nia would never again face danger from the stepmother who had tried to destroy her. And in the quiet moments before dawn, he reflected on the remarkable strength of his daughter and the loyal wolves who had kept her safe, realizing that the bond between courage and nature had created a force far more powerful than fear, envy, or cruelty. The night sky glowed silver as the full moon climbed high above the forest, casting its light over the trees and glistening on the frost-kissed grass. Nia, standing at the edge of the forest with the wolf pack gathered around her, felt the pulse of the night coursing through her veins. The wolves moved silently, their paws making no sound against the earth, yet their presence was undeniable, powerful, loyal, and unwavering. Every flick of a tail, every soft growl, seemed to answer Nia's thoughts, a conversation conducted without words but filled with understanding and trust. She raised her hand, a subtle gesture learned over countless nights of connection and mutual respect. The largest wolf, the alpha, stepped forward, acknowledging her command, and the pack followed in perfect formation. The moonlight bathed Nia and the wolves in an ethereal glow, marking them as extraordinary beings moving with purpose through the forest. With each step toward the palace, Nia felt both fear and excitement, yet she knew the wolves' guidance would shield her. Their loyalty had been earned through courage and kindness, and now it was time to reclaim what had been unjustly taken from her. As they emerged from the forest onto the outskirts of the village, villagers froze in awe and disbelief. Mothers clutched their children, and elders leaned heavily on staffs, their eyes wide as they witnessed a sight that seemed lifted from legend. A young girl, calm and serene, moved with authority that radiated from her very being, and around her, the wolf pack maintained a disciplined, protective formation. Some villagers whispered prayers, while others could only stare, their mouths open in astonishment. The combination of innocence and command, bravery and gentleness, left them speechless. Nia's gaze swept over the gathered villagers. She did not seek vengeance, nor did she display pride. Her presence, amplified by the pack's protective aura, was a silent declaration of justice, courage, and harmony. The wolves circled her lightly, heads low, ears attentive, ready to shield her from any harm. Their glowing eyes reflected the moonlight, creating the impression of spectral guardians walking alongside her, a living emblem of resilience and loyalty. Word of Nia's approach spread quickly through the village, reaching even those who had doubted her survival. As the procession neared the palace, villagers who had once feared the forest and its wild inhabitants now felt a stirring of hope and wonder. They saw that strength was not in domination or cruelty but in unity, respect, and the courage to face injustice with heart and mind aligned. Even the air seemed to hum in anticipation, the night vibrating with the rhythm of paws, hearts, and moonlight. Inside the palace, Mara paced nervously, her mind torn between disbelief and panic. The faint sound of rustling leaves and distant howls reached her ears, growing louder, more commanding. She looked toward the windows and gasped. Nia approached, the wolf pack following like shadows cast in silver, and the queen realized that the girl she had tried to destroy had returned stronger, wiser, and far more powerful than she could have imagined. The villagers lining the streets watched as Nia and her wolves advanced, calm and authoritative. There was no need for shouting, no need for threats. The very presence of courage and righteousness radiated through her. Every step was deliberate, every motion a testament to her connection with the wolves, with nature, and with her own inner strength. The palace gates opened as if in anticipation, and the pack's silent, disciplined march reflected the harmony between the girl and the wild. By the time Nia reached the palace courtyard, the villagers understood the extraordinary lesson before their eyes: bravery, compassion, and respect for life, even the wildest and most feared, can transform fear into awe, cruelty into justice, and vulnerability into undeniable power. The wolves, ever loyal, formed a circle around her, their eyes glowing with trust and reverence, while Nia's calm, commanding presence spoke louder than any words could. The palace, the village, and the night itself seemed to bow to the quiet authority of a girl who had survived, grown, and led the wild forces of nature back to reclaim what was rightfully hers.